Hey guys, tonight we follow a man who once made the world tremble from a place so quiet you could hear a leaf fall, then funded a war so loud even history had to take notes. We're talking about Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine, the patron saint of contradictions, the man who feared nothing except the stillness of sleep. Imagine this. The year is 1985. The city of Medellín is lit like a war zone dressed up for Christmas, and deep in the hills, a king paces through a jungle estate filled with hippos, AK-47s, and secrets that whisper louder than thunder. You probably won't survive this bedtime story, because no matter how sleepy you feel, Pablo's world never lets its eyes fully close. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. He begins not as a myth, but as a boy on a bicycle, his legs pumping through the smoky hills of Antioquia, Colombia. The fog sticks low to the earth like an old dog, and Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, age 10, is already bartering at markets with the sharpness of a grown man. His mother is a schoolteacher, his father a farmer, and his pockets hold more ambition than coins. They say he used to steal gravestones, sandblast off the names, and resell them to grieving families. A dark hustle, sure, but efficient. He never saw death as final, only as leverage. His neighborhood, Envigado, isn't the worst, but it's stitched with struggle. Kids grow fast here, mostly in the wrong directions. Pablo watches, listens, absorbs. When other boys chase soccer balls, he's scribbling numbers in a spiral notebook. His cousins think it's weird. "You're not supposed to be good at math," one says. But Pablo just smirks. He's not doing schoolwork. He's calculating margins. By 12, he's earning pesos moving contraband. First cigarettes, then stereo equipment. His smile starts curving like a knife. People trust him. He doesn't talk much, but he always shows up when he says he will. There's something magnetic about a boy who delivers more than he promises. One day, he notices how a local politician rides through the village. Black car, tinted windows, men with guns, but also people bowing their heads in respect. That gets Pablo thinking. Power isn't just about fear. It's about performance. You have to give them a show they want to clap for. Back home, his mother yells when she catches him hiding a wad of cash in his closet. He tells her it's from tutoring. She knows better. But she also knows this country doesn't hand out futures. It sells them, and only to the bold. School doesn't stick. He enrolls in college briefly for political science, but drops out. His real classroom is the street. He studies smuggling routes like geography, police schedules like calendars. If someone says a road is impossible, he just shrugs and asks for a boat. Mainstream historians often skip over this stage, jumping straight to the cartel years. But this is where the mold sets. This is where Medellín's most infamous son learns that the system doesn't care if you're good. It only responds to those who make themselves unignorable. His friend Gustavo Gaviria, cousin, confidant, the shadow behind the man, enters the story here. Gustavo is smoother, less visible, but just as sharp. Together, they form a yin-yang of street wisdom and charm. Gustavo helps handle logistics, math, and the fine art of not getting shot. By the late 70s, their operation includes a few planes and a handful of airstrips carved into jungle clearings. But even back then, Escobar sleeps with one eye open. It's not fear, it's anticipation. He always assumes someone's coming. Many people still think that if Escobar had stayed small, just a smuggler with flair, he might have lived to see grandchildren instead of bullets. So what do you think? Can ambition ever sleep peacefully? One morning, just after dawn, Pablo sits on a hillside near Envigado and watches the sun cut across the valley. In his lap is a revolver. On his mind is a dream. Not just wealth, but legacy. He wants to be remembered not as a criminal, but as a benefactor, a builder, a maker of monuments. The wind carries dust from the road, and he squints into it, not afraid, but already calculating how to bend it. The boy with the ledger grows into a man with a memory like a steel vault. Nothing escapes it. Every peso owed, every favor granted, every insult muttered under breath, Pablo remembers. But he doesn't carry grudges like weapons. Not yet. He carries them like seeds. He's patient enough to wait for them to bloom into something useful. In his early 20s, Pablo Escobar is still small time, at least by cartel standards. He's dealing in cigarettes, liquor, electronics, items easy to move and easier to resell. But he's not flashy, not yet. He wears quiet clothes and a neutral smile, the kind that makes even cops hesitate to question him. He knows the law better than most officers, and knows exactly where it chooses to look away. One story goes that he walks into a customs office with a truckload of contraband, waves a paper around, and says, "I'm allowed." The officer stares at the paper, confused. It's blank. Pablo grins, slips a wad of cash into the man's pocket, and walks out. Whether that happened or not, it fits the mood of those years. Rules existed, but only for the poor. The turning point arrives not with a bang, but with a sniff. Cocaine. It's already making its way into the U.S. through Central America, but it's expensive to process and dangerous to move. Most traffickers dismiss it as too risky. Pablo sees the opposite. A high-margin, low-weight product that addicts its buyers and bankrupts their logic. He invests carefully. His first lab is hidden in the dense green of Antiochia's forests. Primitive, yes, but it works. The purity is good enough. The profits are insane. He reinvests every dollar. No yachts, no jewelry, just more roots, more labs, more pilots willing to risk everything for an envelope stuffed with cash. By 1975, he's making enough to forget his cigarette business. He and Gustavo move quickly, mapping the routes like cartographers of the underworld. Planes take off from hidden airstrips. Cargo drops happen over the ocean, retrieved by fishing boats that don't fish. Every piece is calculated. Every risk pre-weighed. He starts recruiting. Carefully. Men from the neighborhood, cousins of cousins. Loyalty is easier to ensure when you've known someone since they scraped their knees together. He pays well, protects their families, creates a sense of purpose. And once you're in, you don't leave. And yet, amidst this climb, he still thinks politically. He gives back, builds soccer fields, paves roads, pays school fees for kids who'll never know his name. It's not charity. It's architecture. He's building something. An image, yes, but also a foothold. A place to stand when the world tries to knock him over. One of the more debated claims from this period is that he once offered to pay off Colombia's entire national debt, something close to $10 billion at the time, in exchange for legal immunity. Many people still think that was just posturing. Others say it was deadly serious. So what do you think? If money can buy silence, can it also buy absolution? The legend grows. Slowly. At first, only whispered among smugglers and corrupt cops, but his name starts appearing in reports. Border seizures increase, and with every lost shipment, the rage hardens in him like wet cement drying under the sun. There's a moment, small, almost quiet, that shifts everything. A shipment is intercepted, not by the DEA, not by Colombian police, by a rival, someone bold, foolish, or both. The product is taken, the courier's killed. Escobar's response is surgical. 1 week later, the rival's house burns. His guards are found shot in the eye, execution style. No messages are left, because none are needed. From then on, everyone understands. This isn't business. This is calculus with teeth. By the late 70s, Pablo owns more than rotes. He owns silence. Journalists know not to print his name. Judges hesitate to hear cases involving him. And when he starts making campaign donations, politicians start forgetting how to pronounce his last name. Still, he avoids the spotlight. He prefers whispers to headlines. When he speaks at meetings, it's brief, direct, and unnervingly calm. No shouting, just consequences. Like the time a pilot jokes about skimming a bit off the top. Pablo doesn't react, but the next week, the man's plane crashes under mysterious circumstances. Some say it was mechanical failure. Others say it wasn't an accident at all. Gustavo, as usual, says nothing. In Medellín, the poor begin to treat him like a patron saint. Don Pablo, they call him. He listens, smiles, hands out gifts during Christmas, pays for funerals. He funds clinics and builds apartments. They don't care where the money comes from. They care that it comes. A mainstream historical fact often glossed over. By the early 1980s, Escobar is earning more than $20 million per day. Yes, per day. That number doesn't sound real, does it? But it was. And it came with a weight he could no longer put down. He starts sleeping less. Even then. Not because of guilt, but because of math. The more he earns, the more people he has to watch. And the fewer hours he can close his eyes without something slipping through the cracks. The legend is growing teeth. And somewhere beneath all that concrete, all that calculation, a crack begins to form. By the time Pablo Escobar turns 27, he's no longer just a man with plans. He's a man with blueprints stamped across half a continent. But they aren't drawn with ink. They're carved in silence, bribery, and bullets that rarely miss. He shifts from stealing cars and cigarettes to shipping dreams in powder form. Dreams that can ruin a country or fund one, depending on who you ask. The network keeps growing, and it needs muscle. Real muscle. Not cousins with pocket knives, but hardened men who obey faster than they question. This is when the sicarios come in. Young hitmen raised in Medellín slums, given bikes, guns, and purpose. They kill for loyalty, for survival, for the wages of war. And Pablo? He pays well. Not just in money, but in myth. He makes them feel like soldiers, not thugs. One of his first real lieutenants, El Chopo, starts as a street thief and becomes a guardian of the empire. He's ruthless, smart in a blunt way, and carries out orders with the kind of clarity most people only use to tie their shoes. Pablo doesn't need philosophers. He needs action. Their targets? Traitors, informants, debtors who take too long to pay. And sometimes, just people who ask too many questions. A journalist named Guillermo Cano writes one too many articles connecting politicians to narcos. Cano's paper receives threats, then bombs, then Cano himself, gone. No one is ever arrested. No one ever will be. Still, publicly, Pablo smiles. He buys zoo animals for his estate. He donates to churches. He waves from balconies. He wears shirts a size too tight and keeps his belly in full view, a symbol of both power and permanence. He wants people to know, I'm not hiding. I don't need to. Gustavo keeps the books. The numbers are surreal. At one point, the Medellín cartel controls 80% of the global cocaine trade. That's not hyperbole. That's history. They move tons of product, literal tons. Planes fly so frequently that radar becomes background noise. And yet, for every shipment that lands safely in Miami, one fails. Escobar begins to respond with fire. His rule becomes law in certain neighborhoods. Police dare not enter. Judges suddenly take sabbaticals. And if someone gets too curious, well, accidents happen. There's a famous saying whispered in the city during these years. Plata o plomo. Silver or lead. Money or bullets. That's the choice Pablo gives you. And it's not rhetorical. In one case, a customs agent in Colombia begins inspecting flights a little too closely. A week later, his car explodes. Another one simply disappears. His family receives a generous envelope and a silent message. Don't look. Many people still think that if Escobar had stopped there, kept the violence quiet and the money flowing, he could have run things for decades. So what do you think? Is silence the true secret to empire? Or just its first victim? The U.S. starts to notice. DEA agents begin sniffing around. At first they're just observers, then they become targets. But Pablo is clever. He doesn't attack Americans yet. Instead, he works through intermediaries, hires lawyers, buys politicians, creates shell companies that appear more legitimate than the actual government. Still, he watches, sleeps less. The nights grow longer. Security tightens. Bodyguards rotate. Dogs roam the estate. But nothing dulls the whisper that someone, somewhere, wants him gone. He tries to keep things organized, predictable. But chaos, once unleashed, doesn't go back in the bottle. Rival cartels begin rising. Cali, Norte del Valle. They copy his methods, but not his loyalty, not his fearsome control. And that makes them dangerous in a new way, unpredictable and unafraid of legacy. A lesser-known but confirmed fact. Escobar once lost 500 million to rats. Yes, literal rats. He stored so much cash in rural hideouts that rodents chewed through stacks like dinner. His reaction? Barely a shrug. He reportedly wrote it off as cost of business. His family begins to notice the strain. His wife, Maria Victoria, sees the man she married, ambitious, soft-spoken, becoming paranoid, colder. Their home is luxurious, sure, but the windows are always locked, and laughter grows scarce. He becomes obsessed with maps, not the kind with roads, but with red dots, enemies, allies, informants. He pins them across entire walls and stares for hours. And sometimes, just sometimes, he murmurs to himself. Strategies, names, outcomes. Sleep becomes optional. One night, while pacing the balcony of Hacienda Nápoles, he looks out at the hills. His animals sleep. His guards rotate. But his mind races. He lights a cigar and mutters, "Even the night has eyes." He's not wrong. The shift from scrappy kingpin to sovereign of shadows happens one humid night beside a graveyard in Medellín. It's not metaphor, it's logistics. The meeting takes place beneath flickering street lamps and stone angels dulled by decades of drizzle. There, amidst the smell of wilted roses and damp earth, Pablo Escobar makes a deal that will outlive everyone involved. He meets with remnants of an older smuggling ring, veterans in the art of bribery and discretion. But behind the times when it comes to cocaine, they handle emeralds, coffee, even contraband weapons. Pablo, by contrast, offers them a new frontier. White powder so profitable it could drown whole economies. All he needs is access, routes, boats, pilots, a little trust. He brings cash, not promises. He's 28 and already speaks like someone who's measured the weight of death and found it manageable. He lays out his terms under the cold gaze of marble saints, and by morning, those veterans either work for him or they disappear from the story entirely. After that, the operation evolves like a living organism. More labs rise deep in the jungle, camouflaged beneath canopies thick with birdsong and bugs. Primitive huts become bustling chemistry dens. Escobar hires chemists from Peru, cooks from Bolivia. He refines both recipe and route. His first major cocaine shipment to the U.S.? It doesn't just arrive. It lands with flair. Hidden inside plane parts and perfume crates, the product finds its way to Miami, where a network of Cuban-American traffickers help distribute it through nightclubs and street corners. Within weeks, he sees a spike in profits so steep it feels like fiction. But it's not. It's the moment cocaine stops being exotic and starts being American. And here's a mainstream historical fact to anchor this. By the early 1980s, Miami hospitals see a 500% rise in cocaine-related admissions. That's not paranoia, it's epidemiology. Pablo's influence isn't just criminal, it's chemical. Back in Colombia, he watches from afar. Each successful shipment is a heartbeat, each bribe an artery. He becomes something both organic and synthetic, part myth, part man, entirely unavoidable. But with scale comes fragility. He needs planes. He needs pilots. So he begins investing in private runways, clearings in the jungle where twin-engine Cessnas can land like birds in the mist. He recruits former military aviators, pays them triple what the Air Force ever could, and swears them to secrecy with smiles and implied tombstones. He also starts building his security network, not just guards, but engineers. People who understand radio frequencies, encrypted codes, satellite jamming. He's not running a drug ring anymore. He's running a state, yet for all the precision, he doesn't stop being human. During this time, he quietly purchases vast tracts of land under different names. One of them becomes Hacienda Nápoles, a sprawling estate that will later be infamous. But for now, it's just his. A place to breathe. Sort of. He visits often, walking the grounds, imagining futures. He sketches plans for guest houses and a racetrack. He wants to import exotic animals, not for spectacle, but because something in him always believed in controlling things nature never intended. If God made lions for Africa, Pablo thinks, why not Colombia? But those nights in the graveyard still echo. He grows wary, paranoid, begins sleeping in different locations, wears a bulletproof vest even in his own home. Trust shrinks down to a few people, Gustavo, El Chopo, his mother, and yet he keeps going. Because stopping, to him, feels like dying. Many people still think that this was the last moment Pablo could have walked away. That if he'd pulled out now, rich, anonymous, untouchable, he might have lived to old age. So what do you think? Is it possible to stop climbing once the view from the top blinds you? He doesn't stop. He doubles down. In one of his boldest moves yet, he buys a hangar at a legitimate airport under an alias. customs agents are bribed so heavily they start refusing promotions, afraid to be transferred to posts where the money isn't as sweet. Flights come and go, day and night, with products marked as textiles or fruit. Nobody blinks. A young pilot named Blackie joins the operation. He's quiet, loyal, and talented. Pablo gives him a car, an apartment, and a watch he'll never take off. They say he once made 7 runs in a single week. 7. That's more than most people fly in a year, and every landing he makes is another $1 million tucked into the cartel's bloodstream. Meanwhile, the violence grows louder in the background. A rival cartel tries to muscle in. They seize a shipment, kill 3 of Pablo's men. He responds not with rage, but with math. 4 times as many killed, including the rival's brother. Message sent. One night, while examining a map of Central America, Escobar pauses and asks Gustavo, "What do you think peace feels like?" Gustavo doesn't answer. Instead, he hands him a fresh dossier of new contacts in Panama. That's how things are. No time for philosophy, just momentum. And Pablo likes it that way. For now, white powder may have made Pablo Escobar rich, but the moment he first touches it, really touches it, is far less cinematic than the movies like to show. No mirrored tray, no moody jazz in the background. Just a lab in the jungle, sweltering, buzzing with flies, and a chemist handing him a baggie with an almost reverent nod. He doesn't even sniff it, just pinches the edge between 2 fingers, watches how it settles, like snow with secrets. "This," he says to Gustavo, "is how we rewrite the future." It's a strange thing to watch someone fall in love with a product, especially when that product erases entire communities. But Pablo isn't thinking about users. He's thinking about empire. He sees cocaine not as a drug, but a currency, more portable than gold, more addictive than oil. And best of all, it's invisible to the old money crowd. Too new, too unregulated. A door no one else has noticed is even open. He immediately shifts resources. Cigarettes are done. Stolen cars, pointless. Even emeralds, Colombia's traditional underground cash crop, take a back seat. Everything moves to the labs. At this point, there are 3. Small, makeshift setups with tin roofs, wooden benches, and barrels of chemicals labeled with fake names. He hires scientists. Not the cartoon kind with beakers and lightning hair, but real ones. People trained in university classrooms who now find themselves making deals with the devil in exchange for security and salaries no legitimate research facility can match. The first batches are crude, but potent. U.S. demand is rising fast, especially in Miami and New York, where clubs pump bass as fast as they pump nostrils. American consumers don't ask where the white lines come from. They just want more of them. So Pablo gives them more. He expands, not just the labs, but the entire infrastructure. He buys fishing boats, ranches, warehouses, even cattle trucks. Anything that can hide, carry, or throw off the scent becomes part of the operation. False bottom crates, hollowed-out vehicle frames, even coffee bags laced with scents designed to confuse drug-sniffing dogs. It's innovation, but with consequences. By 1980, shipments reach weekly status, and each one grows heavier, both in weight and in consequence. He uses private runways lit with signal fires and hires entire families just to keep lookouts on hilltops with binoculars and radios. Most are too poor to question anything, and Pablo pays them more than the government ever did. One time, a plane lands and sinks into a makeshift runway softened by rain. The nose snaps. The pilot survives. The product doesn't. Pablo watches as $1 million worth of cocaine dissolves into muddy ruin. He doesn't yell, doesn't blame. He just rebuilds the strip with gravel, then pours concrete. Lesson learned. Mainstream history likes to dramatize his anger, the man who kills at whim, the temper boiling over. But in truth, Pablo doesn't waste rage on the obvious. His real fury, reserved for betrayal and bureaucracy. He starts importing chemicals in bulk through shell companies, bribing customs officers at the ports to look the other way. When DEA officials begin sniffing around, he arranges for false intel to send them on wild goose chases, empty warehouses, decoy labs, staged photos. Back home, the spoils begin to show. Hacienda Nápoles transforms. He builds airstrips, a helipad, a bullfighting ring. He starts collecting exotic animals, lions, giraffes, elephants, anything absurd enough to say, "I made it, and I dare you to stop me." His children ride motorbikes through manicured lawns while hippos wade lazily in man-made lakes. Guests sip imported wine beside dinosaur statues. Real ones, not bones, fiberglass sculptures, towering and ridiculous, because Pablo thinks they're funny, and because they distract from the snipers positioned in trees nearby. Many people still think Hacienda Nápoles was simply a vanity project, but those who were invited knew better. It was a fortress disguised as fantasy. So what do you think? Was the zoo an indulgence or a camouflage? The estate becomes a symbol, a place where deals are struck, alliances are tested, and threats are buried, sometimes literally. Every hallway has a camera. Every corridor leads somewhere unexpected. Gustavo jokes that the animals are probably the safest residents. The government notices, but it's not sure what to do. Escobar donates to charities, pays for schools, even helps build housing projects. The public loves him, or fears him. Often both. He starts to dress differently. Linen shirts, soft colors, gold chains tucked just out of sight. Not a king, but a patron. Not a criminal, but a businessman who just happens to own a zoo full of animals that shouldn't exist in South America. He starts showing up in newspapers, not as a suspect, but as a benefactor. Headlines describe him as a wealthy businessman with interests in import-export. No one mentions cocaine. Not yet. Still, there's pressure. More money means more exposure. More exposure means more enemies. And Pablo hates enemies, especially the kind you can't see coming. He upgrades security again, adds more dogs, more guards, more guns. He even hires architects to build safe rooms beneath several of his homes. Concrete bunkers with their own air supplies, emergency exits, and steel doors you'd need a tank to breach. Sleep becomes rarer. Even inside the palace, he never rests fully. He walks the perimeter at night, checks the locks himself. Not because he doesn't trust his men, but because he trusts instinct more. One evening, standing on the edge of his private airfield, he listens to the distant cry of a jaguar in a cage. The moon is full, the air damp, and for a moment, the king of cocaine closes his eyes. Not in peace, but in calculation. The jungle doesn't mind who owns it. It wraps itself around everything. Cocaine labs, secrets, even kings. Pablo Escobar understands this better than most. He doesn't fight the jungle. He partners with it, hides in it, builds his empire under its green canopy like a spider in the corner of a cathedral. By the early 1980s, his operations stretch from the Colombian mountains to the Florida Keys. The routes change weekly. One day, product moves by boat. The The next, by plane. The day after, it's a coffin flown under false documents, accompanied by a grieving family on a paid vacation. His system is adaptable, fluid, almost biological. The jungle becomes his factory. His enemy's confusion becomes his camouflage. One of the more fascinating moments from this period comes from a now declassified DEA briefing. Escobar's routes are so numerous and sophisticated that shutting one down barely matters, like cutting off a river with a garden hose. That's how powerful he's become, not just in scale, but in philosophy. To Pablo, every problem is a logistical challenge, every threat an equation, and so when interdiction efforts increase, he doesn't panic. He diversifies. More airstrips, faster boats, trusted intermediaries. The jungle, once feared by explorers and fools, becomes a business partner. He even bribes wildlife officers. Think about that. Somewhere, an official in khaki with a patch on their sleeve receives an envelope to pretend they didn't see a giraffe walk past a cocaine lab. Meanwhile, his labs upgrade. Once wooden sheds, now they're semi-permanent structures with plumbing, electric wiring, backup generators. Scientists wear gloves. They test purity levels. They label batches. Gustavo runs the show like a pharmaceutical COO. The line between drug lord and logistics genius is gone. Back in the US, Miami becomes the unofficial North American capital of cocaine. Clubs like the Mutiny, the Forge, and Club New pump out disco beats while bathrooms line with white dust. Dancers, lawyers, models, and dealers swirl together in a nose-blown ballet. Everyone has a guy. Everyone's guy gets his product from someone who knows Pablo. The profits are absurd. Forbes lists Escobar among the world's richest men. Publicly, he scoffs. Privately, he smiles. He likes that the world knows. Without knowing too much, he starts stashing money wherever he can. Warehouses, farms, abandoned buildings. He wraps it in plastic, hides it in barrels, buries it under floorboards. He loses millions to mold, rats, and misplacement. He doesn't care. There's always more. And then comes the moment that changes everything. One of his top pilots, Barry Seal, an American, gets arrested. At first, it seems manageable. Seal has always been a bit of a wild card, charismatic, but reckless. Pablo assumes he'll buy silence, like always. But Seal flips. He cuts a deal with the DEA. Starts flying with cameras hidden in his plane. Documents drop locations. Snapshots of handshakes. The entire operation begins to shimmer with vulnerability. Escobar is livid. Not visibly, but deeply. This isn't just betrayal. It's infection. He orders a hit. Barry Seal is gunned down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, while serving a court-ordered sentence at a halfway house. Broad daylight. No one arrested. Message delivered. That move, however, puts Escobar on the U.S. radar in a way no amount of product ever could. Mainstream historical fact. The U.S. officially labels the Medellín cartel a national security threat. Escobar's name moves from whispered conversation to printed threat briefings at the highest levels. Meanwhile, in Colombia, his reputation divides. To the poor, he's still Don Pablo, the man who builds homes, pays school fees, hands out cash on Christmas Eve. To the upper class and government, he's a nightmare dressed like a politician. And that's the thing, he is a politician now. In 1982, he wins a seat as an alternate member of Colombia's Congress. It's partly strategy, partly ego. He wants legitimacy. He wants protection. And for a brief moment, he has both. He attends sessions, shakes hands, wears a tie. He even gives speeches about social reform. But behind that podium, he's still running one of the deadliest criminal networks the world has ever known. One senator, Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, refuses to play along. He speaks out, names names, Pablo's name. He exposes the hypocrisy, the danger, and then, on April 30th, 1984, Lara is shot dead in his car. Daylight again, public again. No one convicted. The murder is a turning point. The government can no longer pretend Pablo is just controversial. The gloves come off. Many people still think that if Pablo had never stepped into politics, he could have stayed untouchable. So what do you think? Is it pride that ruins kings, or visibility? Escobar retreats to his strongholds. Hacienda Nápoles becomes more than a home. It becomes a bunker. Helicopters hover. Dogs patrol. Guards rotate in shifts. Pablo's own children stop seeing him without weapons nearby. He grows more paranoid. Sleep, always evasive, becomes a ghost. He paces. Sleeps in a different room each night. Builds decoy houses. Surrounds himself with layers of defense so thick that even he forgets who's watching whom. But the shipments keep moving. The jungle still works for him. For now, the jungle might shield Pablo Escobar from the sky, but it can't protect him from what's coming below. A network of angry politicians, frightened allies, and foreign agents with too many photos and too few morals. Still, he's not worried. Not outwardly. Because Escobar doesn't believe in panic. He believes in logistics. After the murder of Rodrigo Lara Bonilla, Colombia's government finally pulls its blindfold off. Overnight, Escobar goes from controversial figure to public enemy. Raids begin. Allies scatter. His seat in Congress, gone. His legal immunity, revoked. So he pivots. There's a plan he's been shaping for months, maybe years. A state within a state. Not quite secession, but something quieter. A narco-state, built on invisible borders and enforced with visible fear. His first step? Buy more silence, then more loyalty. Entire police departments in small towns go on his payroll. Mayors, too. He builds clinics and roads again. Not for PR this time, but because it's harder to bomb a hospital than a safe house. And he doesn't just control supply routes anymore. He owns entire towns. In places like Tranquilandia, his labs are so vast they show up on satellite photos. Warehouses stretch for miles, tucked under jungle leaves. And it's not just workers down there, it's families. Whole communities dependent on his payroll. The DEA finds out. With pressure from the U.S., Colombian forces launch Operation Yari. In March 1984, they destroy one of Escobar's biggest jungle complexes. It's a blow, not because of the loss in product, but because it proves he's no longer invisible. He watches the footage with narrowed eyes. Helicopters, troops, burned barrels. He says nothing, but Gustavo sees it. Something deeper than anger, embarrassment. From that moment on, Escobar begins rewriting the blueprint. Again, he no longer trusts static locations. Everything must move. Labs become mobile. Planes change routes daily. Communications are relayed through coded messages and children on bicycles. And yet something else shifts. Where once Escobar was content with shadows, now he begins to stage power. He hosts lavish birthday parties for poor children. He funds entire neighborhoods, electricity, plumbing, furniture. They call these places Barrios de Pablo, neighborhoods of Pablo. They're not just gestures, they're insulation. Each family that worships him is a human shield against extradition, because that's the real fear now. Not prison in Colombia, but the United States. Extradition becomes his nightmare, a cage far from home, without control, without the rhythms of his empire. He begins speaking out against it, publicly, furiously. In speeches, he calls it a violation of Colombian dignity. In private, he calls it something else, a slow death. Many people still think that Escobar's real empire wasn't built on drugs, but on the fear of extradition. So, what do you think? Was his war on the state about sovereignty or survival? He doubles his security again. His cars are now armored. His guards wear suits and carry briefcases with submachine guns inside. He installs hidden escape tunnels in his homes. And yet, he still visits the poor, still hugs grandmothers who call him hijito, still hands out money folded neatly into envelopes with a child's name written on them. To some, he's still a hero. To others, a plague. But in the press, he becomes something else entirely. A symbol. A question mark shaped like a man. Meanwhile, the violence escalates. Enemies die. Allies too. The Cali cartel grows bolder, smarter, less romantic. They don't care about image. They care about efficiency. And they start targeting Pablo's shipments. His planes. His men. The response is swift. Entire blocks in Medellín go up in flames. One incident, now known as the Monaco bombing, nearly kills his family. His daughter is injured. Pablo, for once, lets his mask crack. He begins to see ghosts in corners that were once quiet. The jungle now feels claustrophobic. The estate, less like paradise and more like a golden cage. Still, the operation continues, daily. Here's a mainstream fact that often gets buried. At the height of his power, Pablo Escobar's cartel is shipping over 15 tons of cocaine per day into the United States. That's a small mountain, moved every 24 hours. He's earning more than most countries, and yet, he's losing peace of mind. Not slowly. All at once, he starts recording phone calls, writing down names, asking the same questions twice. Gustavo notices. The bodyguards notice. But no one says anything, because Escobar doesn't get tired. He gets cautious. Sleep for him becomes a rotation of 5-minute naps in guarded rooms, interrupted by radios crackling in static and whispers through vents. He installs a siren in every bedroom, one button to press if something feels off. They test it weekly. No one jokes about it. The fear of betrayal becomes a sickness. Every smile is suspicious. Every silence, loaded. One night, he catches a bodyguard whispering too softly near a phone. The next day, that guard is transferred, then disappears. His name is never spoken again, and the empire keeps breathing. For now, Pablo Escobar is no longer a smuggler. He's no longer a businessman. He's something harder to define. Half warlord, half messiah, fully aware that the image he projects has become a mask he can no longer remove. And that mask is smiling, because in the streets of Medellín, he's not just respected, he's adored. Mothers hang his photo beside saints. Teenagers brag about seeing him in traffic. Children whisper his name like a charm. He's Robin Hood with better funding and worse consequences. But behind that facade, the logistics grow bloodier. Each week, shipments move from Colombia through Panama, up through Nicaragua or the Bahamas, and into Florida, Texas, or California. Planes drop duffel bags into remote fields. Boats race silently under moonlight. Submarines, yes, submarines, are rumored to be in the works. The business runs with terrifying precision. Each cell knows only what it needs. One team loads the crates, another pilots the plane, a third picks up the goods. If one link breaks, the others don't collapse. They just adapt. And Pablo, He sits above it all, surrounded by radio frequencies, radar maps, stacks of cash, and occasionally a glass of wine he never finishes. Because he's always listening, always calculating. But something changes in the wind. It begins in Miami. The violence escalates. Drug wars spill into suburban malls and beachfront hotels. Shootings in broad daylight. Car bombs. Kids caught in crossfire. The press gives it a name, the Cocaine Cowboys era. And behind every headline, Pablo's fingerprint. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't need to. He's never physically stepped foot in the U.S., yet his presence haunts it like a fog bank. Judges start handing down maximum sentences for possession. Congress begins debating new drug laws. The DEA gets more funding, more agents, and Pablo watches from afar. He starts sending feelers into the American underworld. Lawyers, money launderers, middlemen. His goal isn't just profit now, it's survival. He needs legal pipelines, real estate, bank accounts, a footprint that looks like it belongs, but every move he makes in the States feels like tightening a noose, so he pulls back, not from business, but from exposure. Instead of expanding into new markets, he strengthens his hold on old ones. He buys ports, airports, farmland near shipping routes, and people, always more people. Here's something many people overlook. Escobar had an entire payroll division, not metaphorical, real, staffed with accountants, ledgers, ID verification. He paid his employees weekly, gave them bonuses, sometimes health care, because to him, this wasn't a cartel. It was a company with a dress code made of shadows, and yet, with every paycheck comes a target. Every connection becomes a liability. Informants begin turning up in places they shouldn't be. In courtrooms, in embassies, in morgues. The DEA sends more agents into Colombia. Some in plain clothes, some embedded in the military. They work with the Colombian government on intelligence gathering, wiretapping, interception, so Escobar evolves again. He installs spotters on nearly every block in Medellín. Teenagers paid to sit on rooftops with radios. If a police car enters the wrong neighborhood, Pablo hears about it in under 5 minutes. He calls it La Red, the net. Even Gustavo is impressed. There are military units that don't have this kind of efficiency, he says once, looking over a list of activation times. Pablo just nods, then circles a name on the paper, because there's always someone to watch. Back at Hacienda Nápoles, the atmosphere begins to shift. It used to be a place of indulgence. Now it's a command center. The hippos still lounge. The staff still serves meals. But the laughter is quieter. The shadows feel heavier. One night, a trusted lieutenant confesses that he thinks about leaving the country. He has family in Spain. Wants to start over. Pablo listens quietly. The next morning, the man is found dead in his car. Shot once in the temple. No note. Just a wallet missing. Even Gustavo flinches. That wasn't necessary, he says. Pablo replies he was already gone. That's how things are now. Not personal, just calculus. Many people still think that Escobar had a chance, right then, to step back, to hand over the empire, and disappear. So, what do you think? Can a man whose hands control so much ever truly let go? More rivals surface. The Cali cartel, slicker and more corporate, starts buying influence in places Pablo doesn't. They dress in suits. They don't blow up cars. They hold meetings in conference rooms, not bunkers, and they want him gone. Meanwhile, the people Pablo once funded begin turning their faces. Murmurs in the barrios, murmurs in the Senate. Even the Vatican issues statements condemning the rise of narco-influence in Colombia. Escobar responds the way he knows best, with strategy disguised as generosity. He donates to churches, builds more housing, sponsors youth programs. He even offers to pay off the national debt. Again, the president refuses. Then comes the ultimate test. A new Colombian administration, backed by U.S. intelligence, starts pushing for his surrender. Extradition looms, and Pablo Escobar, the man who fears nothing, begins to fear sleep, not because of what dreams may come, but because of who might find him before morning. Miami doesn't explode so much as it simmers. Club lights flickering behind thick windows, boat engines humming into the dark, and whispers carried from bouncers to brokers, all laced with Escobar's silent footprint. He's never set foot there, yet his presence shapes its skyline. And that's the trick, isn't it? To haunt a city without ever walking its streets. By the early 1980s, cocaine is no longer an imported novelty in the U.S. It's a staple. College kids, stockbrokers, housewives, everyone's either buying or benefiting. And behind it all, quietly and effectively, is a man in the hills of Colombia counting profits no calculator could accommodate. The U.S. takes notice, more than notice. The DEA ramps up their activities, embedding agents across South and Central America. But they're chasing ghosts. Escobar's operation doesn't rely on one path. It's a maze. Intercept a plane? 2 boats arrive elsewhere. Catch a mule? A tunnel opens up below the border. Shut down a lab? 3 more hum to life by sundown. And yet, the more efficient the business becomes, the more anxious Pablo grows. You see, there's a paradox here. The empire's success makes him more visible. Money piles up faster than it can be laundered. Entire towns start accepting Pablo-branded cash. He gives out loans, sponsors marriages, hosts holiday parades. At Christmas, he drops off toys by helicopter. Children scream his name. But so do prosecutors. He knows he can't stay invisible anymore. So, he leans into visibility, but only the version he controls. In 1983, a popular magazine publishes a full profile on him. No arrests, just the story of a wealthy philanthropist from Antioquia with strong community ties. The photo shows him grinning beside children. No mention of the labs, no mention of the guns, but behind that grin, his team is evolving. The Medellín cartel becomes more structured. Gustavo heads finance and logistics. Others oversee transportation, military response, political negotiation. It's less a criminal syndicate now, and more a corporate octopus with armed tentacles. He starts attending elite social gatherings, fundraisers, charity events, not because he enjoys them, he hates small talk, but because it reminds the elite that he's not just a ghost in the jungle. He's a neighbor, a potential investor, a threat dressed like a friend. Still, the walls close in. In Washington, politicians begin describing him by name on national television. The words Escobar and cocaine become shorthand for failed policy, lost youth, rising crime. But back in Medellín, things are different. To the poor, he's still Don Pablo. He pays for their surgeries, sends their children to school, builds churches. When the government fails them, he shows up. With food, with blankets, with promises, and maybe that's what haunts him most, because he starts to believe it. That he's more than a criminal, that he's a redeemer. A necessary evil with better bedside manners than the state. Mainstream historical fact. At his peak, Escobar's cartel was spending over $2,500 per month just on rubber bands to wrap stacks of cash. Rubber bands. His accountants had to write off over $1 billion annually as lost, eaten by rats, water damage, or simple misplacement. But money never really worried him. It was the men, the traitors, the enemies. He starts planting informants inside his own team, testing loyalty by feeding disinformation and watching what leaks. More than once, someone vanishes after a misplaced comment, and then comes the shift no one sees coming. He starts pulling back from international logistics, not stopping the shipments, no, just distancing himself, delegating, creating layers between his name and the product. Because he's thinking bigger now, politics again, he begins reaching out to local leaders, offering funding for their campaigns in return for silence. He backs entire city councils, even buys printing presses for newspapers he wants to influence. But while he moves quietly, others grow louder. The Cali cartel rises with spreadsheets instead of shootouts. They're polished, media savvy, careful, and they hate Pablo's chaos. His explosions bring heat they don't want, so they begin eroding his network, slowly buying out suppliers, turning his men, sharing intel with U.S. officials, masked as tips from concerned citizens. Pablo senses it, but he can't stop it. Not all of it. He starts taking more precautions, never using the same vehicle twice in a week, sleeping in different houses, using children as messengers. Every phone call is bounced through at least 4 payphones. If he stays anywhere longer than 2 nights, he builds a tunnel under it, sometimes several, and yet he still walks through barrios without guards, still hugs the grandmothers, still lets kids touch his watch and say, "It's true, he's real." Many people still think Pablo's biggest mistake was believing his myth. So what do you think? When does a legend stop being armor and start being a coffin? One night, as he sits on a rooftop watching the lights of Medellín flicker in the valley below, he murmurs to Gustavo, "If I die, at least they'll remember me." Gustavo doesn't answer, because in that silence there's truth. Pablo's face is in murals, his name whispered in both gratitude and fear. But inside his chest, the engine never rests. Sleep is now a series of glances, of half-closed eyes and radios humming like lullabies sung by wolves. And the shipments? They still fly, but now so do the crosshairs. Sleep is no longer something Pablo Escobar attempts in a bed. It's something he rehearses between sirens. Rest is rationed like ammunition. A few minutes here, a few hours there. Always in a new room, under a different roof, with guards outside the door and a pistol near his ankle. By the mid-1980s, he is a millionaire many times over, possibly a billionaire. But the price of power is growing heavier than the stacks of currency he hides beneath cow pastures and church floors. Money buys him houses, planes, even silence, but not rest, so he builds walls. Not metaphorical ones, real 10-foot-high concrete fortresses around his homes and estates. Motion sensors, armed guards, rooftop snipers. In some places, electrified fences hum softly through the night, blending with the crickets and the sharp whisper of the Colombian breeze. Still, the tension presses down, because now the pressure isn't just coming from above, it's coming from all directions. The Cali cartel tightens its grip. Unlike Pablo, they avoid spectacle. No car bombs, no public threats. They slip into banks, boardrooms, even politics, offering the same product with less noise. And that makes them dangerous in a new way. They're not just rivals, they're replacements. The U.S. steps in harder. With the Reagan administration's war on drugs, Pablo becomes a talking point in every major speech on narcotics. News anchors pronounce his name like a warning. His face flashes on TV screens across continents. He's not just a threat anymore. He's a brand. Escobar watches all this from behind tinted windows. or through grainy television screens propped on kitchen counters in safe houses. He frowns at headlines, smirks at misquotes. But inside, he feels the trap tightening. To fight back, he turns to something he's always trusted more than diplomacy: theater. The public display ramps up. He funds more housing projects, sponsors more schools, pays medical bills for strangers. At one wedding, he sends flowers to a family he's never met, simply because the bride once thanked him in a radio interview. It's part of his plan. Keep the people loyal. Keep the government afraid to act. Because if they do, they risk backlash from the very neighborhoods they've ignored for years. And Pablo? He knows how to turn a barrio into a barricade, but behind the generosity is calculation. Each public favor is a data point, a name added to his network, a face that might one day look the other way. Still, even he can't ignore what's coming. Here's a mainstream fact too surreal to feel real. By 1987, Escobar is listed as the 7th richest man in the world by Forbes magazine. The article calls him the king of cocaine. He cuts it out and frames it, not out of pride, but out of irony. The press had finally caught up to a version of the truth he crafted years earlier, and yet for all the fame, his circle shrinks. Paranoia deepens. Every conversation is recorded. Every handshake is measured. Every meal is cooked by someone who's been vetted twice and paid 3 times. He keeps his children close, but rarely in the same place. His wife, Maria Victoria, lives in a rotating carousel of properties. They never stay longer than a week. Sometimes not even a night. The windows in every home are bulletproof. The phones are disposable. The cars are mirrored and armored and rotated daily. Some are decoys, others are traps, and yet somehow he keeps working. He meets with lawyers, engineers, smugglers, hitmen, sometimes all in one day. He handles negotiations, reviews profit margins, approves security protocols. He doesn't delegate trust, only logistics. One of his few indulgences? Exotic animals. He keeps adding to his private zoo at Hacienda Nápoles: ostriches, elephants, antelope, and of course, the hippos. Massive, glistening, oddly tranquil creatures that become something of a symbol. People joke that they're his spirit animals. Quiet, powerful, not to be underestimated. But the joke starts to rot, because while the animals relax, Pablo stiffens. He dreams of betrayal, of raids, of someone slipping up. He wakes at 3 a.m. and paces barefoot across tile floors, revolver in hand, listening for breathing that shouldn't be there. And the more he fears, the more he compensates. He builds safe rooms in every property, thick, sealed chambers with food, weapons, radios, oxygen tanks. Each is a coffin with Wi-Fi, just in case. He also begins rehearsing escapes, drills with bodyguards, tests timing, practices silence. It's no longer about luxury. It's about the clock. Many people still think that Escobar was fearless, that he welcomed confrontation. But so what do you think? Can someone who changes houses every night really be fearless? One night, while staying at a countryside villa disguised as a flower farm, he hears a noise outside his window. Just a twig snapping. Just once. He doesn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, he burns every document in the house, leaves the property in disguise, and never returns. Because Escobar doesn't believe in chances, only in patterns. And that sound? That was a break in the pattern. Even silence when interrupted becomes a language, and he's fluent in every dialect of danger. Hacienda Nápoles, once Pablo Escobar's private paradise, is no longer a playground. It's a fortress. And fortresses, as history teaches, are never just about keeping others out. They're about trapping fear inside. From the sky, the estate still looks absurd. A luxury compound carved out of jungle, with a private zoo, fountains shaped like dinosaurs, and a life-sized sculpture of a crashed airplane that once carried his first US-bound cocaine shipment. Pablo calls it a monument to vision. Gustavo calls it a provocation. But what it really is a kingdom built by a man afraid to sleep. Everything inside Napoli's is engineered for defense. Rooms with panic buttons, bunkers behind bookcases, a network of underground tunnels that could hide him for days. Pablo can vanish inside his own walls like a ghost, and often does. One night, he orders a fake family dinner. A full table set, a roasted pig, wine uncorked. But no one eats. The moment the guests arrive, he's already gone, watching from a second-floor peephole to see who stares too long, who reaches for a phone, who might have come for more than pork. Trust, even with family, is now a luxury he won't afford. And yet, in the daylight, the illusion holds. School children arrive on buses for tours of the estate. They point at flamingos, feed the hippos, laugh beside statues. Parents smile nervously, unsure whether to be grateful or worried that their child is touching the gates of a man who moves death like freight. Escobar watches from a balcony, not with pride, with calculation. Every laugh is insurance, every photograph another notch in his armor. Meanwhile, the cartel runs with such precision it could be mistaken for a shipping corporation. Product still moves daily, hidden in hollowed-out furniture, inside fake bananas, even inside dolls. The creativity is endless, and each successful shipment is a heartbeat that tells Pablo it's still working. But then comes the next evolution. Politics meets paranoia. The Colombian government, under increasing pressure from the United States, introduces new laws specifically designed to cripple Escobar's network. Extradition is back on the table. Arrest warrants multiply. Allies in government begin to vanish from view. And Pablo, never one to wait, acts. He calls a meeting. Not with his usual lieutenants, but with lawyers, accountants, public relations experts. He lays out a bold idea. What if he could surrender? On his terms. Not prison, not trial, a negotiation. He'd fund national programs. He'd disarm his people. In return, no extradition, no U.S. trials. He'd be imprisoned in a place he built himself, safe, controlled, dignified. They laugh at first, but then they realize he's serious, deadly serious. Thus, La Catedral is born, a private prison designed, funded, and controlled by Pablo Escobar. It sits high on a foggy hill overlooking Medellín, isolated, imposing, custom-built with luxury cells, a billiards room, a bar, and a waterfall. Yes, a waterfall. The government agrees, not because they're fools, but because they're tired. Every attempt to capture him ends in explosions. Every raid ends in blood. If this keeps civilians safe, they'll take the deal. And so, in 1991, Pablo Escobar surrenders. Publicly, he arrives in a convoy. Cameras flash. Reporters bark questions. He walks up the hill like a man heading into a 5-star resort, which, in many ways, he is. Mainstream historical fact. Escobar's prison included a discotheque, a jacuzzi, and a personal chef. He was allowed to select his guards, many of whom were former cartel employees. Inside La Catedral, Pablo is safer than he's ever been, and more in control. He holds meetings, throws parties, even invites prostitutes and entertainers for weekend visits. The prison becomes a command center under the guise of confinement. But here's the thing about gilded cages. They're still cages. Escobar quickly grows restless. He doesn't like being watched. even by his own men. He starts punishing guards for small mistakes, starts questioning Gustavo more often, starts pacing again. Sleep, which he hoped would return, stays distant. He walks the halls at night, alone, checking locks he already checked, staring out windows he had built to be unbreakable. His dreams, when they do come, are frantic. Helicopters, missed calls, faces half-lit by gunfire. He doesn't feel imprisoned. He feels rehearsed. Like every movement is part of a play he's grown tired of performing. Many people still think this was Escobar's final chance at peace. So what do you think? Can a man who builds his own cell ever truly believe he deserves freedom? Still, for a while, things are quiet. The Catedral hums with routine. Outside, his enemies pause. The U.S. watches, irritated but patient. The Colombian government declares victory. Medellín breathes again. But deep inside, the king who feared sleep stirs, because even behind those thick walls he hears footsteps that don't belong. And in his chest, the rhythm of paranoia drums louder than ever. La Catedral is not a prison. Not really. It's a waiting room, a foggy hilltop kingdom where Pablo Escobar still rules, just with fewer roads and more locks. The guards salute him. The food is prepared to his liking. His slippers are warmed near the fire. But freedom, even in costume, begins to itch. He plays soccer with the guards. He wins, of course. No one dares block his shot. He drinks wine from crystal glasses and sleeps beneath ceilings he paid for, with hidden compartments no one else knows about. His old crew visits. His accountant updates him weekly. His phone still rings with deals, with shipments, with whispers of men who need removing. But something's off. The air feels stale, the walls tighter, the silence thicker. A few months in, he hears a guard laugh in the wrong tone. Not threatening, just wrong. That night, the guard is reassigned. The next day, Pablo repaints the room, not because it needed it, but because routine becomes suspicion, and suspicion becomes habit. Still, he tries. He plays chess. He writes letters. He reads novels about great generals and tragic kings. He pretends this is a pause, not an ending. That he is here by choice, not necessity. That the world beyond La Catedral hasn't changed. But it has. While Pablo sits in luxury, the world continues to evolve without him. The Cali cartel tightens its grip. They buy officials. They stay quiet. They learn from Pablo's mistakes. Their name is whispered less. Their shipments face fewer raids. And they aren't burdened by shrines or murals. Then comes the breaking point. 2 of Escobar's closest lieutenants, men he once called brothers, steal from him. Not thousands, millions. And worse, they try to flee. They think La Catedral has softened him. They're wrong. He invites them up the hill, smiles, hugs them, shares a drink. Later, their bodies are found mutilated inside the compound. It's no longer a rumor. Pablo Escobar is killing people inside his own prison. The Colombian government, already nervous about the optics, panics. This wasn't part of the deal. A line has been crossed. They demand a transfer to a real prison, a facility they control. Pablo doesn't wait for the order. He vanishes, just like that. One night he's there, the next, gone. Slipped through a hidden tunnel, escorted by guards who had sworn to watch him, paid by cash they'll never admit to holding. Mainstream historical fact. On July 22, 1992, Pablo Escobar escapes La Catedral without firing a single shot. What follows is chaos. The government is humiliated. The U.S. fumes. Colombia's elite scrambles to explain how the most wanted man in the world simply walked away from the prison he built himself. But for Pablo, the escape is both a triumph and a curse. He's free, but not freer, because now there is no pretense, no deal, no veil. He's a fugitive in every sense, hunted by his enemies, hunted by the state, hunted by the very ghosts he once paid to stay quiet. He retreats to safe houses, not estates, not villas, apartments with peeling paint, farms with dried-out wells, shacks so humble they feel like lies. He dyes his hair, changes weight, uses code names, communicates through children on bicycles again, and sleep? Sleep becomes a rumor. He moves every 48 hours, sometimes more. No phones, no lights near windows. Dogs sniff door frames for traces of explosives. Guards rotate, guns under pillows. Exit plans rehearsed hourly. His family disappears from public view. Maria Victoria and the children go into hiding. He tries to call them, but every call risks detection. He whispers to them, always afraid someone else is listening. And yet, the network survives. Even on the run, shipments move, payments arrive, enemies vanish. The rhythm slows, yes, but never stops. Because Pablo didn't just build a business, he built a belief, a structure that persists even when the architect is missing, but not everyone is loyal. The betrayal begins quietly. One lieutenant accepts a smaller bribe. Another leaks a safe house location. Then a former ally offers intelligence to a government task force in exchange for immunity. And then come Los Pepes, people persecuted by Pablo Escobar, a vigilante group made up of his enemies, former allies, and angry ghosts. They don't knock. They don't warn. They burn homes, kidnap relatives, leave corpses in trunks as messages, wrapped in barbed wire and silence. Pablo hears about them over the radio. At first, he dismisses them. Then he loses 3 men in a single night. Then his family is targeted. The man who once slept in zoos now sleeps in basements, on thin mattresses, clutching his gun like a prayer. Many people still think this was Pablo's unraveling, that the king died the day he ran from his own prison. So what do you think? Is freedom worth it when it comes dressed as exile? He keeps moving, but each step feels heavier, each shadow longer. Even the animals at Hacienda Nápoles are gone. Some sold, some escaped. The hippos, oddly, thrive, spreading into rivers, wandering free like living metaphors. And somewhere deep in the jungle, Pablo Escobar whispers to himself, I had it all, and now I sleep like a thief. Because kings who build their own cages rarely remember where they left the key. There are fewer doors left to knock on, and those that open now open slowly, cautiously, always with someone else's finger resting near a trigger. Pablo Escobar, once the undisputed king of Medellín, is now a man wrapped in shadows too heavy to carry for long. The jungle no longer feels like an ally. It's damp, moldy, a place of rot and whispers. The roads he once paved with money now grow over with weeds. The homes that once waited with food and fresh sheets now keep their lights off when his convoy approaches. He's not a guest anymore, he's a liability. Even Gustavo, ever loyal, begins to question the map. The routes grow tighter, the suppliers jittery. Some refuse his calls, others answer with vague apologies. The old empire, so carefully engineered, begins crumbling. Not from police raids, but from internal decay. People are simply done being afraid, and yet, he keeps moving. One safe house to another. A villa, a basement, a rural farm guarded by teenagers with hunting rifles. Sometimes the electricity works, sometimes it doesn't. A shower becomes a luxury. A hot meal, an event he never unpacks. Meanwhile, Los Pepes grow bolder. They torch warehouses, shoot former associates, kidnap family members of his inner circle. The bodies they leave behind are not subtle. Their messages are clear. The myth is over. And still, Pablo clings to control. He calls newspapers, sends cassette tapes with statements, denies everything, threatens everyone. He insists he's still in charge, but the tone has changed. His voice, once velvet over steel, now carries a tremor, a softness that sounds like fatigue. Mainstream historical fact. At one point during his final year, Escobar offered to turn himself in if he was allowed to build another private prison. The government this time laughs. He tries to negotiate asylum for his family. Germany, Libya, even South Africa. Most countries politely decline. Others don't respond at all. He's radioactive, a walking target with too many enemies and too few allies. His wife, Maria Victoria, and their children eventually move under government protection. Not as a favor, but as bait. Pablo knows this, accepts it, doesn't like it, but understands. He begins calling them through scrambled lines. Never more than a minute, never twice from the same place. Those calls become everything. His only reason now. His only thread to something that still feels human. One call almost gets him caught. A sudden burst of static. An odd delay on the line. He hangs up mid-sentence and vanishes within minutes. The safe house he leaves behind is raided the next morning. He barely escapes. That night, he doesn't sleep at all. Not even his usual 10-minute half-dozes. He just sits on a mattress, staring at a wall, tracing invisible escape routes with his fingers. He eats less, talks less. His beard grows in patchy. His clothes hang looser. He still carries the same pistol, the same walkie-talkie. But his hands tremble more than they used to. Even the guards start to feel it. One of them, a kid no older than 19, asks Gustavo in a whisper, "Does he know it's over?" Gustavo doesn't answer, because deep down, they all know. The DEA steps up its surveillance. Colombian intelligence narrows the list of safe houses. Rumors circulate of satellite triangulation, of voice print recognition, of secret foreign teams operating within the country. Whether all of it's true doesn't matter. Pablo believes it is, and belief alone is enough to crack a mind stretched this thin. He trusts no one, not even Gustavo, not fully. He starts writing down thoughts in a leather-bound notebook, hiding it under floorboards. The entries aren't business, they're reflections, observations. Sometimes single sentences. The jungle forgets faster than it protects. I gave the people their homes, but they gave me no doors to hide behind. If I die, I hope the hippos remember me. Many people still think that Escobar's end began not with bullets, but with loneliness. So what do you think? Is the quiet at the end of power louder than war? Still, there are moments, small, strange moments, when he smiles. A guard tells a joke. A radio plays a song he used to dance to. A plate of rice arrives still hot. He doesn't speak of legacy, doesn't mention the money. It's all somewhere, sure, buried, hidden, converted into foreign accounts. But what's the use now? He can't touch it, can't spend it, can't even gift it. What he does do, though, is walk. Long, slow circuits around whatever compound he's hiding in. At sunrise, at dusk, barefoot if he can. Listening to the world breathe without him. He's still feared, but no longer obeyed. He's still alive, but no longer living. And each night, when he does close his eyes, it's not to dream. It's to rehearse. What will he do if they come through the north wall? What if they fake the voice of his son on the radio? What if someone on his team has already flipped? Because Pablo Escobar knows one thing above all else now. The manhunt doesn't sleep, so neither can he. December 1993 arrives with a kind of hush, as if the city of Medellín itself is holding its breath. The holidays approach, but for Pablo Escobar, the air is cold, not with celebration, but with calculation. He's thinner now, eyes darker. His breath sometimes whistles in the early hours, as if his lungs are tired of pretending. Still, he moves. His latest hideout is a modest, 2-story home in a middle-class neighborhood. Nothing flashy. A place designed to blend, to vanish. He keeps it clean, stacks newspapers in corners, organizes food in tin cupboards. It's the kind of house where nothing ever makes noise unless it's meant to. But what really matters here is the roof. Flat. Open. Good visibility. He spends hours there, sometimes pretending to stretch, sometimes pretending he's still part of the sky. In truth, he's scanning, always scanning, for shadows in the alley, for the click of a shutter, for the rumble of boots that won't miss this time. Gustavo is gone now, killed. And with him went the last person who truly understood the rhythm of Pablo's thoughts. The last man who could challenge him without fear. It said Escobar didn't cry, but he didn't speak for 3 days after, so now it's just him and a voice. His son, Juan Pablo, becomes his lifeline, the only voice that still softens something in him. They speak over the phone, briefly, cautiously. Each call is a risk. The government has tapped hundreds of lines. The DEA is triangulating signals. Every second on the air is another bead of sweat on a satellite map. Still, Pablo calls. He can't help it. The world has abandoned him, but his son still says Papa like it means something, like he still matters. Mainstream historical fact. On December 2nd, 1993, one of these calls, lasting less than 2 minutes, is traced by a Colombian surveillance team. A unit called the Search Block, trained by the U.S., receives the coordinates. They move. Meanwhile, Pablo paces. His radio buzzes with static. He clicks it off. He's tired. Not of hiding, but of pretending the end isn't near. He's begun carrying 2 guns at all times now. One for return fire, one for himself. Just in case. Earlier that day, he had joked with his bodyguard. If they catch me, tell them I've already left. They both laughed. Kind of. By afternoon, he's eating lunch alone. Eggs, beans, a bit of rice. He watches a cartoon on a small TV with the volume low. Outside, children laugh down the street. For one strange second, it sounds like peace. And then it ends. Boots slam pavement. Radios crackle. A rooftop collapses inward under the weight of a dozen tactical officers. Dogs bark. Glass breaks. The hum of helicopters overhead becomes deafening. Escobar runs. He doesn't grab much. A gun. The radio. He takes the stairs 2 at a time, bursts onto the rooftop. Bullets already chew at the brick beside him. He fires back. Twice. Maybe 3 times. His aim isn't careful. It's defiant. Witnesses later say they heard a single voice shout, "There he is," before the final shots. One enters his leg, one hits his back, one just behind the ear. Many people still think it was suicide. That Pablo Escobar, ever the tactician, had reserved the last bullet for himself. So what do you think? Is it better to fall by your own hand than someone else's? The rooftop grows quiet. Blood soaks into the concrete. The man who once moved more money than most governments lies still, face down beside a pile of broken tiles and scattered papers. No grand speech, no last stand. Just breath, then none. Downstairs, his mother is calling his name from a radio, unaware that silence has answered. The press arrives fast. Cameras capture the body. A bloodied polo shirt. A gun by the hand. Police posing beside the corpse like fishermen beside their catch. Later, the search block poses for more pictures. Smiles and thumbs up. As if they've ended something cleanly. As if myth could bleed out so easily. But back in the barrios, things feel different. Some people cry. Others cheer. Some shrug and go back to sweeping their doorways. Because power, when it dies, rarely takes its shadows with it. At Hacienda Nápoles, the animals roam freely now. The hippos wade in waters unchecked. The estate is looted, painted over, transformed into a crumbling relic that tourists will one day call charming. And Pablo Escobar? He is buried in Medellín. Flowers pile up. Graffiti appears. Gracias, don Pablo. Nos fallaste, patrón. Te fuiste sin despedirte. A week later, someone leaves a letter on his grave, written in shaky blue ink. You gave us homes, but never peace. I hope you finally found some. But many believe he didn't, because for a man like Pablo Escobar, peace was never the point. Power was. And now, as dusk settles over the city he once ruled, the only thing that sleeps easier is the hunt. The rooftop where Pablo Escobar died is quiet now. There's no echo of gunfire, no press flashes, no boots scuffing concrete. Just a breeze, gentle and almost indifferent, curling over broken tiles and faded bloodstains. Because even ghosts grow tired of pacing. Down in Medellín, the city exhales. Not loudly, not with banners or speeches, just a slow, collective unclenching. It's the kind of relief that doesn't come with celebration, only fatigue. For too long, every car backfire felt like a threat. Every knock could have been a raid. Now there's stillness, not peace exactly, but a pause, and inside that pause, the question begins to form. What now? The government releases a statement, calm, clipped, triumphant. The war on drugs, they say, has turned a corner. But corners lead somewhere, and no one's sure what's around the next one. The Cali cartel, for instance, is already maneuvering, quietly filling the vacuum, like water seeping into cracks. Less flashy, more strategic. They don't buy zoos or build prisons. They prefer banks and briefcases. But power, real power, hates a vacuum. It will always return, dressed in new clothes, speaking softer, but asking for the same price. Still, for the average Colombian, something has changed. The streets are a little safer. The night sky feels wider. Mothers breathe deeper when their children come home late. The hippos at Hacienda Nápoles, oddly, become a national curiosity. Left behind by a man who couldn't keep his own name safe, they thrive, breed, multiply. They wander into nearby rivers. They show up in villages. They are, in a way, Pablo's last empire, silent, surreal, impossible to ignore. Tourists begin visiting the estate. They take photos beside the dinosaur statues, pose beside the crumbling airstrip. Some laugh. Others stand quietly, trying to imagine what it must have felt like to own all this and still sleep with your eyes open. His family fades into obscurity, protected perhaps, watched certainly. His son later writes books, gives interviews, tries to make sense of a man who gave him bedtime stories with one hand and kept a pistol in the other. The world moves on, but not completely, because Escobar, like all myths, didn't die when his body did. He fractured, splintered into documentaries, T-shirts, tattoos, narco corridos. A Netflix series will someday give him new lines to speak. A video game will resurrect his likeness. He becomes a brand, a cautionary tale, a fantasy. And many people still think that Escobar was never truly defeated, only transformed. So what do you think? When does a man end, and when does he simply evolve into the memory people want him to be? The DEA closes its file. The search teams disband. His face slowly disappears from bulletin boards and intelligence briefings. But in dark corners, in back rooms and border crossings, his methods live on. Because Pablo Escobar didn't just build a drug empire, he wrote a manual, one that others will study, copy, revise, but none will wear like he did. Now, in the quiet, the man is gone, but the echo remains. An empire that rose too fast, burned too hot, and left ashes that still blow through the streets of Medellín with every shift in the wind. And beneath it all, beneath the legacy, the terror, the headlines, is a single, absurd truth. He feared sleep, not because of guilt, but because he knew that the second he closed his eyes, the world would change without him. So now, dear listener, let's leave him here. Let the echoes fade. Let the walls he built crumble under the weight of vines and years. Let the hippos roam. Let the man who ruled from rooftops and bunkers, who traded mercy for margins, finally be still. You're safe now. The king is gone. His empire sleeps, and so can you. You've walked beside shadows tonight, followed a man through jungles and cities, through noise and silence, through mansions and makeshift hideouts. You've watched him rise with ambition, fall with paranoia, and vanish into the soft hush of twilight. But now the story ends, not with gunfire, but with quiet. The concrete is cold, the night is calm, the sirens are long gone. Outside your window, the world hums with different sounds. Distant cars, a ticking clock, maybe the soft rustle of trees. No one is chasing you. No one is knocking. You're not holding a radio in the dark or counting the steps to the nearest exit. You are safe. You are still. Let your breath slow now. Let your jaw unclench. Feel your hands settle. You've earned it. You don't need to look over your shoulder. You're not building tunnels. You're not hiding names. You're here, just here. And while kings and cartels may haunt history's pages, they do not belong in your dreams. Let them fade like mist under the morning sun. You, my friend, get something Pablo never did. A full night's sleep, so close your eyes. Let the quiet in. Let it wrap around your chest like soft smoke. Let the rhythm of rest return to your chest like it never left. You're free. You're home. And it's okay to sleep now. The prison was never meant to be a cage. For Pablo Escobar, La Catedral was a throne room with higher walls, a kingdom carved from stone, wrapped in fog, and softened with luxury. He built it not to serve time, but to bide it. A pause button, not a punishment. But what happens when the world doesn't pause with you? He designed every inch, hand-picked the guards, customized the cells, arranged the furniture. There were billiard tables, a waterfall, a bar. On Sundays, there were steaks on the grill and imported whiskey in glasses. On birthdays, the guest list included comedians, soccer players, even beauty queens. It wasn't a sentence. It was a statement. Even my punishment belongs to me. But control, like walls, cracks with pressure. News of La Catedral's conditions leaked quickly. Aerial photos showed the mansion-like compound, complete with a helipad. Journalists found former employees eager to describe parties, drug deals, even torture rooms. Political pressure mounted. U.S. officials called it an embarrassment. Colombian leaders called it a temporary measure. But the public called it something else. Proof. Proof that Escobar wasn't just avoiding justice. He was laughing at it. And inside those walls, Pablo heard the shift. First, his guests grew fewer. Then, his calls took longer to connect. Even his most loyal men started taking longer to arrive, or not arriving at all. He began to sense a tightening. Subtle at first. Less meat at dinner, less information from the outside, more side eyes from guards he once considered friends. And then came the order, a formal request from Bogota. Pablo was to be transferred to a standard prison, one with real cells, real security, real rules. Pablo didn't hesitate. He refused, flatly, without negotiation, without panic, because refusing wasn't the backup plan. It was the plan. He'd anticipated this, expected the betrayal. So he did what he always did, moved before the knife landed, a tunnel, dug months before, hidden behind a wardrobe, opened to a steep forest path. A car waited, already running. A change of clothes, a radio, a map. His escape wasn't desperate. It was rehearsed, mainstream historical fact. When authorities arrived to transfer Escobar in July 1992, they found an empty compound. No guards. No resistance. Just a note that read, essentially, too slow. The fallout was immediate. The president, under U.S. pressure, ordered an all-out manhunt. A special task force, the search block, was given full authority. U.S. satellites scanned Colombian terrain daily. Interpol issued notices. Allies were arrested. Safe houses raided. Every whisper became a potential lead. And Pablo? He was already 2 steps ahead. He abandoned opulence. No more villas or flashy convoys. He moved in short jumps, always on foot, always in shadow, sleeping on mattresses laid across bare floors, waking to the sound of nothing, and trusting it even less. He grew a beard, wore fake glasses, changed clothes daily, ate only food he prepared himself. His eyes, once calculating, became hollowed, alert to the point of paranoia. Every dog bark meant proximity. Every footstep in gravel meant possibility. Even so, he kept the network breathing. The cartel didn't crumble. Not yet. Orders were passed in code. Money delivered in briefcases and lunchboxes. Violence became localized, precise, quieter, but no less brutal. One informant's family disappeared without trace. Another was found sewn into a mattress and dumped in a canal. Escobar never issued direct threats. He didn't have to. His legend did the talking. But the hunt was changing too. Los Pepes, the vigilante group made up of rivals and victims, started closing in. They didn't follow laws. They didn't answer to courts. They answered to revenge. Funded by the Cali cartel, rumored to be aided by intelligence agents, they began dismantling Escobar's world from the inside out. Warehouses burned, family members abducted, mistresses tortured. Even former friends defected, seeing which way the wind was blowing. Pablo's empire, once bulletproof, began bleeding from the inside. Many people still think that if he'd stayed in La Catedral, he might have lived. So what do you think? Can a man who builds his own prison ever survive the world outside? One night, he hears a helicopter hovering too close. He doesn't run. He walks to the window, opens it, and stares straight into the darkness. Not yet, he whispers, but even he doesn't sound sure anymore. When Pablo Escobar steps into the jungle after fleeing La Catedral, it isn't as a man escaping prison. It's as a fugitive leaving behind the last structure he ever controlled. The mountain winds bite colder. The shadows feel different. For the first time in years, he's not dictating the rules. He's dodging them. The Great Escape is not cinematic. No shootout. No chase. just a quiet disappearance, like a whisper pulled back into the trees. A few guards vanish with him, loyal to the end, or maybe just scared enough to keep running. His convoy, once made of bulletproof luxury SUVs, is now reduced to borrowed motorcycles, public buses, and short sprints in beat-up sedans. The man who used to bribe presidents now pays drivers in crumpled bills. Yet the escape works, at least for a while. The government flails. International press roars. Politicians fall over themselves trying to explain how the most wanted man in the world simply evaporated. The public, weary and skeptical, shrugs. Of course, Escobar escaped. He built the place, didn't he? Inside the search block, a newly reinforced coalition of Colombian military, police, and U.S. intelligence, the tone changes. This is no longer a containment strategy. This is a hunt, and they're hunting a ghost. But Pablo still has moves. He changes his appearance, drops weight, grows out his hair, then cuts it, dyes it, shaves his mustache, then grows it again. He adopts new names, new homes. He burns every photo of himself he can find, avoids cameras like landmines. If he had his way, the world would forget what he even looked like. He changes phones daily, uses street children to run messages, taps into municipal lines. His engineers rig radios that bounce signals through decoys. Some calls are traced to empty houses with warm coffee still on the table. Others lead to traps. A car rigged with dynamite. A hotel room rigged with nothing but confusion. Still, the circle tightens, because for every trap that works, two don't. Every fake name must eventually meet a real one, and every man has only so many doors left to knock on. The safe houses become smaller, damp, crowded. Once, he hides for a week in a small bedroom with 6 others. One has the flu. Another keeps coughing. At night, Pablo sleeps with a wet cloth over his face, not for disguise, but to muffle the sound of his own breath. He trusts fewer people, then no people. Food is brought, not shared. Instructions are written, not spoken. No one sees him sleep. No one sees him shave. When he leaves a room, he takes the light bulb with him, and yet he still operates, still moves product, still punishes betrayal. A cousin's name appears in a leaked document. The man is found dead in a canal the next week. A courier delivers the wrong coordinates. His car explodes at a traffic light. The war has gone underground, but it hasn't stopped. It's just quieter now, crueler. Meanwhile, Los Pepes move with impunity. They don't knock. They burn. They leave messages carved into doors, spray paint on buildings. One reads simply, "Sleep with one eye open, patron." They target his family, his lawyers, his suppliers. They follow his money, what's left of it, and set fire to anyone who touches it. A banker in Bogotá is found hanging in his own vault, and yet the myth endures. One night, in a slum outside Medellín, a woman shelters a man she believes is Escobar. Turns out it's not, but she does it anyway. "He paid for my roof," she says later. How could I say no? Mainstream historical fact. In the months following his escape, Escobar is estimated to have moved at least 2 more tons of cocaine. Not bad for a man sleeping on borrowed floors. But the numbers matter less now. It's not about the business anymore. It's about staying alive. He begins to show cracks. He forgets things, names, places, routes. His hands shake more. His voice, once smooth and deliberate, becomes clipped, tense. One night, his remaining guard finds him staring into a mirror, whispering something. He leans in to hear it. "I never meant to rule," Pablo says, but even he doesn't sound convinced. Many people still think that Escobar's descent began the moment he could no longer control the air around him. So what do you think? Is a king still a king if no one listens when he speaks? He moves again. Another house, another name. At this one, the windows are bricked over. The front door is a slab of steel. There's a bucket in the corner for emergencies. The only light comes from a hole in the ceiling. He says it reminds him of the jungle, but everyone knows better. It's not camouflage. It's a coffin waiting for movement. He's no longer a man with a schedule. Pablo Escobar lives by gut now. Intuition sharpened into instinct, polished by fear. Mornings bleed into evenings without ceremony. His beard grows uneven, his eyes darker than sleep, and his weight shifts like someone waiting for the earth to betray him. He doesn't talk unless necessary. And when he does, it's to give orders, not opinions. Conversation is risk, trust, a myth. Even breathing too loudly feels like an invitation. Outside, the most expensive manhunt in Colombian history is unfolding. By late 1993, the government dedicates an estimated $300 million, directly and through U.S. aid, toward capturing him. Drones, satellites, wiretaps. High-level surveillance once reserved for war generals now follows a fugitive living under a fake name in borrowed houses. The DEA calls it the final phase, but Pablo calls it what it is, a game. He still plays it well. Still moves locations every 48 hours. Still knows which roads aren't watched, which cops can be bought, and which couriers won't hesitate when the drop gets hot. But it's not like before. The empire is quiet now. Dusty. Shrunken. Like a machine that keeps running even though no one knows how or why. The shipments are smaller. The men more hesitant. The new generation doesn't worship him like the old guard did. Some don't even recognize him. One of his younger guards once asks, "Were you really the guy with the hippos?" Pablo stares at him for a moment, then smiles. "Still am," but his smile is brittle, thin, like old glass. Los Pepes are everywhere now. They've grown from a whisper campaign into a full-blown execution squad. They're funded, informed, and, it's said, even protected by rogue elements within the Colombian government and foreign agencies. They don't knock, they announce. Murders spike. Former cartel lieutenants turn up dead, some tortured, some simply vanished. His accountants begin defecting. His mistresses are interrogated. The few lawyers who still answer his calls do so with the tone of men reading their own eulogies. Then, one night, something shifts. A location is compromised, not just suspected, confirmed. He gets a call at 2:30 a.m. The line crackles. A voice says, "They know. He's out in under 3 minutes." Leaves behind everything. A half-eaten meal, a suitcase of money, even his radio. Only the pistol makes the cut. And the notebook. Always the notebook. The safe house is raided an hour later. It's empty, except for a page torn from a calendar, with one word scribbled in the margins. Almost. The message isn't for law enforcement. It's for the myth, because Escobar isn't just running. He's writing his ending. There's a debate, has been for years, about whether Pablo began orchestrating his own downfall in those final weeks. Did he want to go out in a blaze of bullets? Did he grow tired of the hiding, the hunger, the hours spent tracing cracks in concrete ceilings? Many people still think Escobar preferred martyrdom to aging. So what do you think? When everything you built begins to rot, is it nobler to burn the house down yourself? He starts taking more risks, longer phone calls, familiar streets. He even visits his old barrio once, dressed as a delivery man just to walk past the home he bought for his mother. He doesn't go inside. He just stands there, under a flickering street lamp, for 3 full minutes, a ghost returning to the doorway of its origin. Later that week, he writes in his notebook, "I was never hiding. I was remembering." The search block grows more aggressive. They install tracking vans outside radio towers. They monitor friends, cousins, childhood neighbors. A drone captures grainy footage of a man resembling Escobar entering a building. The footage is sent to Washington. The response comes in under an hour. Go now. Meanwhile, Pablo is tired. He doesn't run quite as fast. Doesn't sleep even in pieces. He talks to himself more. Talks to the hippos, too, though none are nearby. Once he asks a mirror, "Do you still believe in me?" Then he chuckles, because even mirrors lie eventually. He starts carrying a radio again. Not for safety, but for memory. The crackle of static reminds him of when everything moved to his rhythm, when codes flew faster than bullets, and silence always meant something was working. Now, silence is too honest. The notebook fills. Lines get shorter. I miss the soccer games. I wonder what the boy thinks of me now. I used to have maps. Now I just have shoes. One of his last safe houses has no furniture. Just a mattress, a crate for food, and a plastic chair facing a boarded-up window. He sits there for hours, not watching, just listening. Outside, a dog barks. Somewhere in the distance, a motorcycle backfires. Then silence. He lifts the radio, clicks it on. "Is anyone listening?" he says, and the static answers. It's December 1st, 1993. Pablo Escobar hasn't bathed in 2 days. He hasn't smiled in 4. The mattress he sleeps on is thin and cracked. The window in the safe house is boarded up, but he knows the sun is out. It warms a square of dust on the floor. Outside, life goes on. Cars, kids, radios playing Vallenato. But inside, the air is heavy with breath he no longer wants to exhale. There's a mirror in the corner. He doesn't look at it much anymore. At 50-something, he feels much older. Not in years, but in weight. His bones ache like they remember every step of his rise. His spine hums with tension. His ears ring, sometimes at random, like sirens only he can hear. He hasn't seen his family in weeks, hasn't touched them in months. His wife and children are protected, somewhere safe. Maybe not. Every time he calls, it's a risk. Every time he doesn't call, it's worse. The radio is his tether. It sits on a milk crate beside a bag of arepas and a pistol. Its antenna is bent, its casing cracked. But when he presses the button and hears his son's voice, scratchy, distant, gentle, he almost forgets. Almost. The calls are short now. 1 to 2 minutes, always coded, always fast. Once, he just says, "Did you eat today?" and hangs up after hearing yes. He tells no one when he makes the calls. Moves houses after each one. Sleeps in clothes. Eats standing up. Trusts no walls. And yet, part of him starts to relax. Not because it's safe, but because he's tired of pretending it ever was. The pressure becomes normal. The fear, familiar. When a neighbor dog barks, he counts to 10, then opens a window. If he hears nothing else, he breathes again. In the early hours, he writes. The notebook's pages are nearly filled, each entry shorter than the last. One says simply, "If they come tonight, I won't run." The search block is coming. With help from Los Pepes, they've traced his location down to a tight grid. And now, with technology that didn't exist a year ago, radio triangulation tools, signal mapping devices, and constant monitoring, they're narrowing it to single buildings. They've missed him before, by minutes, seconds even. But now, they have the edge, because this time he stays too long. He's in a barrio he knows well, a neighborhood with brick walls and low rooftops, where the houses lean on one another like secrets shared. His current hideout is modest. 2 stories, no furniture, barely a working faucet. But it has something more valuable, a clear rooftop view. That's why he picked it. He spends hours up there, just standing, watching, remembering. At dusk, the rooftops turn gold. The streets soften. Children kick deflated soccer balls in the dirt. Grandmothers sit outside shelling peas. Life happens just meters away from the most wanted man in the world, and they don't even know, or maybe they do, and choose not to care. After all, he built clinics here, funded schools, paid for funerals. In the eyes of some, that erases the bombs, or at least dulls their echoes. But the silence doesn't fool Pablo. He knows he's being watched. He sees new shadows on the street, notices a parked car that hasn't moved in 2 days, hears a different tone in the neighbor's radio. He tells his bodyguard, "We leave tomorrow, early," but tomorrow never comes. Because that night, just before bed, he makes a call. Too long, too familiar, too emotional. His voice, for once, isn't masked. He asks his son how school is going, asks if he's reading the books he sent, then says, "You know I love you, right?" His son answers, "I know, Papa." And somewhere, in a cold van on a different street, a monitor beeps. A technician taps a screen. Coordinates flash. They have him. The order is given. Quiet, efficient, no drama, just action. Move in the morning, keep it fast. Pablo doesn't sleep well. He never really has. But this time, when he lies down, he doesn't even close his eyes. He just stares at the ceiling, hands crossed over his chest, not waiting, just listening for the one sound that always comes at the end. Footsteps. Morning comes without fanfare. The sky over Medellín is soft, pale, indecisive. Clouds hang low, brushing the rooftops like a hand reluctant to wake someone. In the barrio of Los Olivos, there's no sign that history is about to exhale. Inside a plain 2-story house, Pablo Escobar is already awake. He never really slept. His bodyguard, Álvaro de Jesus Agudelo, nicknamed El Limón, sits across from him, eating bread from a paper bag. The house is silent, except for the occasional creak of a beam or the crackle of the small radio resting on a table between them. Pablo lifts the radio, dials a frequency. Static. Then a voice. His son. Faint, but unmistakable. The call lasts just over 90 seconds. It is his final one. He says, "Stay close to your mother," and that's it. No goodbyes, no poetry. Just a father doing what he always did, trying to sound and control, even when the walls begin to lean in. Across town, the search block is already in motion. At the command post, an officer receives confirmation. They've triangulated the signal to a narrow rectangle of homes. The team is briefed quickly, efficiently. They don't expect a gunfight, but they prepare for one. The convoy rolls out. Armored trucks, unmarked cars, plainclothes agents with body armor under their jackets. No sirens, just a growing hum, like something about to be broken. At approximately 2:30 p.m., they reach the house. Agents fan out. Rear perimeter secured. Rooftops covered. A final check on weapons. Radios clicked off. Silence, then contact. They knock, but only as courtesy. Inside, Pablo hears it. He doesn't run, not immediately. He glances at El Limón. No words pass between them. Just a shared moment of resignation, then movement. They rush upstairs. Pablo has always planned for rooftops. He climbs fast for a man his age. Habitual, instinctive. El Limón follows, slower. By the time the door is kicked open, the rooms are empty. But the rooftop? It's chaos. Agents flood the house. Others take position outside. On the roof, Escobar appears, half shrouded by the brick ledge, pistol in hand. He fires. 2 shots, maybe 3. not well aimed, not carefully placed. The sound is sharp, but distant, like a fight he's too tired to finish. They return fire. El Liman is hit first. He stumbles, a flash of red on a white shirt. He drops hard. Pablo keeps running. Barefoot now, one hand on his waistband, the other gripping the pistol like a promise he made long ago and can't keep anymore. He makes it across the tiles. There's a second ledge, a small leap to the next building. He's done it before, in drills, in escapes, in daydreams where he outruns death. But this time, he doesn't make it. A bullet catches his leg. He falls forward. Another shot through the back. Then the third just behind the ear. He drops hard. No drama, no monologue, just blood and concrete, and a body too heavy to carry legacy anymore. Mainstream historical fact. Pablo Escobar was declared dead at 2:50 p.m. on December 2nd, 1993, from a gunshot wound to the head. The rooftop goes quiet. The air for a second holds still. Then footsteps. Agents flood the scene. Radios buzz. A call goes out. Target neutralized. Some men pose for photos, some don't. One agent, later interviewed, says, "He looked smaller than I imagined. Like the weight had finally come off him." Back in the barrio, word spreads quickly. Children peek around corners. Mothers close their windows. Somewhere, someone starts crying. Not out of grief, but out of exhaustion. It's over, or at least this part is. The next morning, newspapers print the photo. Escobar's lifeless body, face down on the rooftop, his shirt soaked red, his pistol just out of reach. The world sees it and exhales, but the story doesn't end with a photo, because somewhere in the outskirts of the city, a boy asks his father, "Wasn't he the man who built the soccer field?" And the father hesitates before saying, "Yes. He also built the fear." Pablo's mother identifies the body. His family mourns in private. No grand processions, no monuments. His grave modest. His legacy anything but. Many people still think he chose death, that the final bullet was his. So what do you think? Is choosing your end an act of power or surrender? On the rooftop, the blood dries. The clouds shift, and the search block leaves with a name crossed off and a myth left behind. The city doesn't cheer when he dies. Not really. There are no fireworks, no parades, no politicians waving from balconies declaring the triumph of justice. There is, instead, a long, low sigh, a collective release of pressure from a population that had been holding its breath for more than a decade. And in that silence, Medellín begins to take inventory. People talk about it in markets, in barbershops, over plastic cups of Tinto coffee. Some say justice finally arrived. Others say it's all theater, that someone else will take his place by next week. A few still say he was a saint in the barrios, a monster in the headlines. Most are just tired. In the hills outside the city, an unusual quiet hangs over Hacienda Nápoles. Without Pablo, the estate feels hollow. The animals, once a symbol of absurd opulence, now roam without direction. The hippos, in particular, are thriving. They've broken through fences, wandered into rivers, even frightened fishermen in small canoes. No one knows what to do with them. No one claims ownership. They simply remain. Like him, down in Bogotá, the Colombian government tries to pivot. Officials hold press conferences, issue statements about reform, about rebuilding the justice system. But everyone knows there's more cleanup to do than speeches can handle. The search block is disbanded soon after. Some of its officers retire, some are reassigned. A few receive quiet commendations. Others return to neighborhoods where their faces are remembered, and not always with gratitude. And as for Los Pepes, they dissolve. Officially, unofficially, fragments remain. Contacts, connections, the kinds of favors that don't need paperwork to exist. The men who once hunted Pablo now look at one another with wary eyes. Some disappear, others prosper, because power doesn't vanish. It just gets a new mailing address. Meanwhile, across the country, smaller cartels rise. Ones that learned from Escobar's mistakes. Less flashy, less violent, more integrated. They move product through legal businesses, hire lawyers instead of hitmen. They understand that survival isn't about force. It's about discretion. Escobar's old lieutenants scatter. Some die in hotel bathtubs. Others flip for protection. A few, remarkably, disappear entirely. Ghosts in their own stories. And the public? They start watching TV shows. By the late 1990s, Pablo becomes entertainment. His life is dramatized, repackaged, sold back to the very people who once locked their doors because of him. A generation too young to remember the bombs watches actors play his role. Quotes are printed on posters, t-shirts, memes. A whole mythology grows. The patron, the last outlaw, the man who took on the world. Many people still think Escobar won, even in death. That he controlled his narrative better than any law ever could. So what do you think? Is immortality found in fear or in fame? His family changes their name. His son becomes a speaker, a writer, an advocate for peace. He gives interviews. He tells the truth, mostly. He condemns his father's actions, but speaks of him with a complexity few are willing to hear. Not forgiveness, just understanding. At Escobar's grave, tourists begin to arrive. Some leave flowers, others selfies, and still some just stand there, quiet, confused, unsure whether to feel something reverent or revolted. The inscription is simple. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, 1949-1993. No title, no tribute, just years. Markers on a life that overflowed every border drawn around it. And back in the outskirts of Medellín, someone builds over the house where he died. A new family moves in. They repaint the walls. They hang a photo of their children over the place where a legend fell. They don't talk about it. They don't need to, because now the city is theirs again. And Pablo, he's just a shadow caught between memory and myth. Still whispering in alleyways, still swimming in the eyes of hippos that shouldn't exist, still tucked in footnotes and file folders and stories told late at night. When someone says, "You know who used to live there?" and the others lean in. Even now, it begins with a phone call, just like it always did. December 2nd, 1993, late afternoon. Pablo Escobar sits on a borrowed mattress in a quiet house on Carrera 79B. His beard is untrimmed. His shirt is wrinkled. His pistol rests beside a half-eaten arepa. He presses the button on his battered radio phone and dials. He doesn't mask his voice this time. His son answers. It's a brief call, a soft exchange. They talk about the cold, about staying strong, about maybe seeing each other soon. He asks if his mother is safe. He tells his son to study hard. He ends the call the same way he always does. But this time the words carry a different weight. I love you. Those 3 syllables float across a wire laced with surveillance, and that's how they find him. The signal is traced within seconds. A nearby van bristles with equipment. A technician confirms the coordinates. The search block is deployed. No debate. No delay. The order is given. Go now. At 2:45 p.m. they close in. Pablo's guard, El Limon, sees them first. Unmarked cars, fast footsteps, rifles raised. He shouts. Pablo doesn't need an explanation. They scramble up the stairs. Pablo grips his pistol. Not because he thinks he'll win, but because he refuses to surrender. It's not bravado. It's choreography. a routine he's practiced too long to forget. The roof is flat, the sky is bright. He runs for the next building, his body bent forward, gun clenched, shoes slapping tile. A shout from below. There he is! Then the bullets. One hits his leg. Another? His back. The final, just behind the ear. He falls face first. A man meeting concrete the way he once met enemies. Directly, without flinching. Mainstream historical fact. The Colombian government reported Escobar was shot 3 times. But to this day, the debate lingers. Was the fatal shot self-inflicted? His family always said yes. His enemies said no. His legend refuses to answer. El Limon lies nearby, already dead. A pool of blood stretches between them like a ribbon of silence. The search block moves in. Some cheer. Others stare. A few take photos. One kneels beside the body, touches the wrist. Not for a pulse, but to confirm something surreal. It's really him. The news hits Medellín in waves. Radios interrupt broadcasts. Journalists rush to payphones. Someone hangs a Colombian flag from their window. Someone else lights a candle. But no one celebrates. Not loudly. Because even in death, Pablo Escobar is not a man you mock. The rooftops remain eerily still. And across the city, in a quiet government facility, his body is prepared, cleaned, photographed, documented, for history, for closure, for myth. His mother is called. She identifies the body through tears that don't spill. His wife is informed. His children go silent. Many people still think that Pablo arranged his own death, that the final shot was his, delivered not in panic, but in control. So what do you think? Was it the final act of a man who always stayed one step ahead, or the end of a king outpaced by time? The house is eventually stripped. The neighbors paint over the bullet holes. Children return to play on the street. But for a while, every rooftop in Medellín feels like it might be watching. Escobar's funeral is modest but crowded. Mourners line the streets. Some cry. Some bring flowers. Some whisper stories of money given, lives spared, gifts left in silence. Others spit when they pass. One boy is asked why he came. He was the only man who ever bought my mother's shoes, he says, and walks away. There are no speeches, no tributes, just a patch of grass, a simple grave, and a name that refuses to stay buried. Because Pablo Escobar didn't just die, he became a pause in history. A silence between wars, between empires, between the flash of a gun and the whisper of a memory. And from that silence, a question still lingers. Did he fall, or did he finally rest? His death doesn't clean the slate. It just closes a chapter written in fire and folded bills. The search block disbands, yes, but the war doesn't end. The machine that Pablo Escobar built, oiled with fear and bribes and silence, doesn't grind to a halt overnight. It sputters, fragments, reorganizes, like a hydra whose head was cut, only to grow 2 more. And the city? It's unsure how to grieve a man like Pablo. Some try. They hold masses, light candles, paint murals. Children scrawl his name in chalk on walls still pocked with bullet holes. Others tear the paintings down, spray over his face, curse him in the market while counting pesos they wouldn't have without him. The truth is inconvenient. It doesn't line up cleanly. He built hospitals. He bombed airplanes. He paid school fees. He buried rivals. He hugged children. He ordered executions. And when you stack it all, you don't get justice. You get contradiction. The people closest to him, what's left of them, scatter. Some head north, into the folds of distant countries. Others stay and try to blend in, changing names, changing accents, changing gods. His mother remains in Medellín, mostly silent, mostly surrounded by ghosts. His wife and children are offered protection, not because the world forgives them, but because it's easier to keep the myth contained than to let it roam. One of the most poignant sights from the weeks after his death isn't the grave, or the estate, or the photographs. It's a quiet video, rarely aired, of the funeral procession moving through the narrow streets of the city. He both blessed and bloodied. No armored trucks, no national flags, just people, some throwing flowers, some throwing stones. Mainstream historical fact. Over 25,000 people attended Escobar's funeral. Some came to mourn. Others came to confirm he was really gone. In that crowd, every kind of face. A woman whose home he built, a police officer whose partner he killed, a boy with no shoes staring at the dirt, unsure why everyone around him feels so much. And behind it all, behind the grief and relief, there is the quiet question no one wants to say aloud. What now? Because Escobar didn't just sell drugs. He sold attention. He sold fear. He gave poor people a name to chant, a villain to blame, a patron to call on when the government turned its back. With him gone, something deeper crumbles. Not just a cartel, a certainty, a rhythm. A king, for better or worse, is still someone to point toward when the wind shifts. Now the wind just spins. Within months, Medellín changes. More soldiers, more surveillance, fewer gunfights, but more unease. The smaller cartels rise in his absence, slipperier, smarter, quieter. They learn from him, but don't idolize him. They don't need zoos or golden pistols. They just need accounts, ports, and silence. Meanwhile, in the United States, lawmakers point to his death as a sign that the war on drugs is working. But shipments still land, the streets still hum, and the demand as strong as ever. So what did his death change? That's the question that lingers in corners and at kitchen tables. Many people still think that Escobar's removal saved Colombia. Others say it merely delayed the next fire. So what do you think? Is tearing down a statue enough if the foundation remains? One man, a reporter, visits the rooftop where Escobar died. It's empty now. The roof repaired. A water tank installed near where the body had once sprawled. He leans against the ledge and writes in his notebook, "The king is dead, but the kingdom was never built in marble. It was made of fog, and maybe that's the truth. Maybe Escobar's legacy isn't the money or the mayhem. Maybe it's the silence he left behind, a silence no one quite knows how to fill. Long after the rooftops go quiet and the flashbulbs fade, Pablo Escobar begins his second life. This time not as a man, but as a question mark. The question is everywhere. Graffiti on alley walls. ¿Dónde está el patrón? T-shirts in Bogotá. Escobar lives. Documentaries, podcasts, museum tours. And in every story, a different Pablo. To some, he's still a devil in a white linen shirt. To others, a misunderstood Robin Hood. In truth, he was neither. But truth, like legacy, bends under pressure. Tourism picks up. Medellín, once synonymous with danger, rebrands itself. The city adds bike paths, trendy cafes, graffiti tours. Tourists arrive from Europe and the US, camera straps across their shoulders, tracing the footsteps of a man they know mostly from television. They take selfies at the grave, pose with former sicarios turned tour guides. Some visit the ruins of Hacienda Nápoles, where hippos still wallow in muddy ponds that look oddly serene, and then they leave. But Medellín stays. It still wrestles with the question, how do you bury a myth that refuses to stay underground? In classrooms, teachers try to explain him in bullet points. Drug trafficker, murderer, politician, philanthropist. But the students don't blink. They've grown up with his shadow hanging behind every chalkboard. On television, new series emerge. Slick, stylized, bingeable. Escobar becomes dialogue, becomes costume, a punchline, a plot twist, a ringtone. He's played by actors who speak fluent Spanish with perfect lighting. None of them smell like the sweat and metal of rooftop firefights. None of them ever slept in concrete basements with guns for pillows. Still, the image sticks. The soft voice, the mustache, the half-smile. Mainstream historical fact. Since his death, more than a dozen major films, books, and television series have centered around Pablo Escobar. His name, at times, is more valuable in entertainment than it ever was in narcotics. His family, meanwhile, rebuilds a different kind of life. His wife changes her name, keeps to herself. His children grow up in the shadow of someone they loved but can't defend. His son, now going by Sebastian Marroquin, publishes a memoir, travels, speaks publicly, calls for peace, apologizes for the past he inherited. "I loved him as a father," he says, "but I won't defend what he did." And the country, it moves forward, but never untouched. There are scars that don't fade, places where car bombs once bloomed, corners where bullets lived longer than laughter. People don't always talk about it, but it shows up in small ways, in the way a stranger looks twice when a motorcycle passes too slowly, or how a grandmother double bolts a gate at dusk. Still, there's healing. The barrios Escobar once funded now have clinics funded by the state. Kids still play soccer on fields he built, but they don't chant his name anymore. Not as often, because memory ages too. Many people still think Pablo's real power was in how he made people feel. Feared, yes, but also seen. So what do you think? Can a country ever fully erase someone who gave both terror and hope? One journalist writes, "Escobar is Colombia's most persistent ghost. Not because he haunts, but because we keep inviting him back in." And maybe that's true. Because even now, decades later, his story is retold by new voices, reframed by new lenses. The question isn't whether he was a monster. The question is whether we ever truly wanted him gone. Because with him, the lines were clear. Good, bad, rich, poor, law, crime. And without him, it's all a little quieter, but also a little less certain. The statue was torn down, yes, but the pedestal still stands. And on some nights, when the lights of Medellín twinkle just right, and the wind carries the sound of music through narrow alleys, it almost feels like he's still watching. Not as a king, not as a man, but as a mirror, reflecting everything we want and everything we're willing to trade for it. The years keep rolling forward, as years tend to do. And Pablo Escobar becomes something even stranger than a legend. He becomes a lesson, taught in universities, debated in think tanks, quoted by politicians who once denied ever knowing his name. But Medellín simply lives. The city doesn't forget, but it refuses to be defined. It learns to wear scars like stories, quiet reminders of what was survived. The skyline changes, tech hubs rise, public transport improves. Young people walk streets once ruled by curfews with headphones in, unaware that their freedom is built on the ashes of a man who sold fear like candy. The rooftops are quiet now, but not in fear, in peace. There's a mural not far from where he died. It's bright, almost defiant. A girl with headphones, standing tall, painted next to the phrase, "Aquí crecemos." Here we grow. The world still pokes at the past. Books are written, conspiracies whispered. Some claim he faked his death, escaped to Venezuela or Cuba, or even the US. They say the man on the roof was a double. That Pablo had one last trick, but even legends can't outrun physics. The man died. The myth, however, well, that walks differently. His hippos still roam the Magdalena River basin. At first, the government considered culling them. But then the tourists came. Scientists intervened. Now they're part of a delicate ecosystem that no one intended. and no one quite knows how to undo. Much like Pablo himself, many people still think he was inevitable, that someone else would have filled the gap if he hadn't. So, what do you think? Is it the man who shapes the world, or the world that shapes the man? And what happens when both are too stubborn to bend? The notebook he carried in his final weeks was never recovered. Some say he burned it before the raid. Others say one of the officers took it, kept it as a souvenir, maybe sold it to a collector. But maybe it never mattered what was written inside, because everything he feared, desired, and destroyed already left ink in the world itself. 1,000 buildings that wouldn't exist without him. 1,000 families that never healed because of him. 1,000 nights where footsteps meant something more. His grave still sees visitors. Some pray, some spit, some just stand. And above that patch of grass, the wind passes through. Soft, detached, disinterested, as if even nature has grown weary of the story. And so we reach the end. The rooftop is quiet. The phones are dead. The notebook is closed. And the man who once ruled empires from jungle hideouts, who dined with presidents and hid beneath drainage covers, who carved tunnels and burned millions to stay warm, now sleeps beneath the same sky he once tried to buy, but not peacefully, because peace was never something he built for himself. He built fire. He built worship. He built fear, and maybe that's the tragedy, that a man who gave houses to strangers couldn't give himself a single night of rest. So now we let him rest, not because he deserves it, but because we do, because stories end, even if echoes don't. Word count, 104. Wind down, 300 words. So now, as the final rooftops fade behind us and the echoes of distant radios go quiet, we leave Pablo Escobar behind, not as a figure to admire or condemn, but as a reminder of what power costs, of what myth-making demands, and of how deeply a single man can dig his footprints into the dirt of a country. Let your shoulders drop. The tension in the story has done its job. The rise and fall, the chase and the stillness, the fire and the fog. Now it's time to exhale. You're not on a rooftop anymore. You're in your own room, somewhere far from Medellín, with the soft hum of night around you. Maybe a fan, maybe a faint breeze against the curtain, maybe silence, clean and empty. You've carried the weight of a king tonight, one who feared sleep more than death, who built kingdoms out of cement and smoke, who never trusted quiet, but chased it anyway. And now here it is, not his quiet, yours. Let it hold you like a city that finally stops running. Let the last page of his notebook close without a sound, and let whatever he was, legend, villain, shadow, slip out the back of your thoughts like footsteps finally fading down a stairwell. Breathe. You made it. You survived the kind of night he never could. Good. Now sleep.